Bonjour à tous et à toutes.
Good morning to all, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here so early, and there are so many of you. We're so happy to note that there are more people in this room than we actually expected because it is so early in the morning. So we'd like to warmly thank you for attending this meeting. My name is Ido Yao. I'm the director of the International Bureau of Education of Unesco. It's based in Geneva, and we work on improving the quality of education through the transformation of curricula. I would like to start by greeting two of our ADGs with us here this morning. Mr. Edouard Matoko, he is the Assistant Director General for Priority Africa and External Relations, as well as Ms. Stefania Giannini, the Assistant Director General for Education at Unesco. I would also like to warmly greet the numerous ministers in this room, as well as Mr. Abeni. Thank you for being here. And also Mr. Magoa, representing the Minister of Education from Kenya. I would like also to greet the representatives of African youth.
These challenges are counterbalanced by numerous opportunities, such as its dynamic youth population, the abundance of its natural resources, the cultural renaissance on shared heritage and history, and development of peace and democracy, where education and knowledge sharing constitute a key solution. Education, as we all know, is a fundamental human right, a development multiplier, and a foundation for peace and sustainable development for all. At UNESCO, we believe in the power of education as the main tool to transform our lives, our societies, and to protect the planet. In order to address challenges while seizing the opportunities to implement SDG 4 on ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education and promote. We are gathered here today to harness the power of soft power, explore and share vision, and recommend concrete action towards Africa's quality education for all agenda. In this regard, UNESCO continues to maintain Africa as one of its global priorities, and today we are going to briefly present to you the new operational strategy for Priority Africa for the period 2022-2029, and its two flagship programs, which are related to education, namely Flagship Program 1, Campus Africa, Reforming Higher Education in Africa, better known as Campus Africa, which seeks to reinforce higher education in Africa for sustained improvement of the tertiary education systems based on local capacities and aims to establish inclusive, robust, and innovation quality education. We will also present flagship program number 2, on the general history of Africa as a catalyst for achieving Agenda 2063 and the 2030 Agenda, better known as the general history of Africa, which is a series of volumes that calls for education and cultural transformation, that promotes a new authentic African narrative on Africa through the reappropriation of its history based on its languages and its cultural heritage. We will start this session with an introductory remarks from Mr. Edouard Matoko, our ADG, Priority Africa and External Relations. Mr. Matoko will give us an overview of the new operational strategy for Africa, for Priority Africa, for the period 22-29. After Mr. Matoko, the floor will be given to Madam Stefania Giannini, our ADG Education, who will present the two education-related flagship programs, namely Campus Africa and the General History of Africa. After the two presentations, we will hear from the voices from the room. The floor will be given to people in the room to react to what they just heard. With this, and without further delay, I would like to hand over the floor to Mr. Edouard Matoko. Please.
Thank you, Ido. Excellences, Mesdames, Messieurs les ministres.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, Mr. Ambassadors, permanent delegates, dear ministers, dear colleagues of the African Union, dear Hombeni Mashileni. Also, I'd like to greet the ambassadors of goodwill, the goodwill ambassadors with us here today. And I'd like to greet particularly all our colleagues from the field offices who supported us in the drafting of this new strategy for Priority Africa. Mr. Ido is the director of the IBE, and Mr. Sweldersvalk is the chairperson of the board of directors of the IBE. He invited us to a board meeting in Geneva for the presentation of this new operational strategy for Priority Africa. I would like to greet as well all the participants to this summit, youth, young people and the representatives of civil society. It's the very first time that we present in public and in front of such a prestigious audience the new strategy, and we'll do presentations for the other sectors when the opportunity arises. I'd like to underscore what a long way we've gone to before the adoption of this new strategy that was adopted at during the General Conference last October. Why do we call it a new strategy? Because it's a sequel, as it were, of a previous strategy adopted for Africa 6 years earlier. This new strategy reasserts the commitment of UNESCO for Priority Africa, and it's also the outcome of internal consultations with the members of the Africa Group and with all our partners in the field. The ambassadors and permanent delegates here, African and non-African, took an active part in the drafting of this new strategy, which does show that Priority Africa today is not only the business of Africans, but it should concern everywhere, and Africa is definitely a priority for all of our organization. It's also the result of a new way of reflecting on African challenges. Africa is no longer a continent of poverty where you only see hungry children. Of course, there are still problems, but we want to look at the positive side of things. As the African Union says in Agenda 2063, an integrated Africa with a positive image and actively contributing to the construction of the planet. We want to see an Africa where young people do take an active part in citizen life. We want them to take part in the transformation of the African continent with all its positive aspects, cultural, political, pedagogical, and the rest of it. And UNESCO will take its full part. This strategy meets these objectives, talking about demographics. By 2050, the African continent will be the most populated on the planet. We still have progress to make regarding social inclusion, but we did make big progress, though, also in access to education. This cultural renaissance allowing Africans to relate to themselves through their history, and then the fourth technological revolution, artificial intelligence, with the pros and the cons, the adoption of an ethical charter on artificial intelligence by UNESCO is really at the forefront of what we believe we should do so that these new technologies adapt to the African continent, so that they're not excluding technologies. And we should should be able to appropriate, learn about those technologies. Those technologies should be open and distributed to all. Here at UNESCO, we adopted a recommendation about open science, and the COVID pandemic showed that many societies, many African countries are excluded from scientific knowledge. I mean, they're at the margin. So we want to, of course, extend access to scientific knowledge for all. Actually, this operational strategy has 5 flagship programs. Today we'll focus on programs dedicated to education, but let me mention them briefly. In addition to Campus Africa and the general history of Africa that we mentioned, there is another flagship program that aims at reinforcing the capabilities of African states regarding cultural heritage. Despite its huge wealth in terms of cultural heritage, Africa is the least represented on the list of world heritage, because we need more expertise to put our dossiers together, and we have to beef up that expertise regionally. Also, I mentioned artificial intelligence, both from the ethics point of view and the introduction of those technologies in administrative system, in education systems, in all aspects of life. There is a flagship program dedicated to those new technologies, and then another flagship program on open science and scientific research to reinforce the scientific development of Africa. Today, Africa accounts for only 3% of scientific research production, and in terms of distribution, the flows tend to go to the north more than to the south, and we have another flagship program to enable Africa to be present on the international scene. Today will be devoted to the 2 flagship programs, Campus Africa and the General History of Africa, which is really a beautiful and emblematic project of UNESCO. More than 70 specialists, historians, non-historians, Africanists, non-Africanists contributed to the drafting of those 8 volumes. It's a huge piece of work, and the last 2 volumes, 9 and 10, focusing on contemporary problems in Africa and also an African diaspora and the contribution of the diaspora to the development of the African continent. This is a key project because it gives Africans their identity back. A resolution was adopted in 2006 at the summit of the African heads of state, and in 2012, so that this general history of Africa be introduced in an adequate way and taught in all African education systems. We'll hear the testimonial of Kenya, Angola did it, Mozambique and other African countries did that. So through that flagship program, we will try to have more similar actions implemented so that at the end of the period of that strategy, all of the African countries will have adopted the general history of Africa as a landmark and a point of reference. Stefania will tell you more about this program. So that's a brief summary. I'd like again to greet very warmly all our partners, African, non-African, the permanent standing delegations, financing and supporting the Priority Africa program, not only in culture but also education and science as well. The aim of that awareness growing exercise with all the ministers and presentation and delegations that are present is to convince them that they should be funding those programs. We need money to make all that tangible and real. And hopefully all the partners present here will convey our message to their capital city and their governments so that Priority Africa is properly funded and becomes a reality. Thank you for listening, and I head back to our moderator. Thank you so much, Mr. Matoko, and I'd like to hand over to Ms. Stefania Giannini. She will tell us more about Campus Africa and the general history of Africa. You have the floor.
I'm very happy, very honored to be with all of you today. I think my colleague Edward has already explained the spirit, the real sense of these two initiatives, and already set the scene greatly, so I don't want to say much more than these. I think we are together today to put the spotlight on two flagships that are really close to UNESCO mandate and close, if you allow me, to my heart, because they are both about real development for a continent which is the core of the future of the world, for the reasons that my colleague has already explained. The first flagship is about higher education, is about a dimension of education which cannot come later and or in addition, but which can be integral part of the right to education. And the idea we have at UNESCO, and I'm sure all of you share with us, of education as a common public good, as the key enabling factor for development, for sure, but also for freedom and prosperity. Achieving 2030 agenda as well 2063 agenda requires absolutely strong universities, higher education infrastructures. And there are institutions that historically produced the knowledge, the skills to deliver on its transformational goals. As I will explain, what we call Campus Africa has the ambition to connect universities across the continent, to increase opportunities and to expand the collaboration within the continent and across continents. The second flagship relates to a pioneering, very well-known Unesco project that the majority of you in this room will be absolutely familiar with, the General History of Africa, and the statement by the International Commission on the Futures of Education to the pre-summit underscores the need to decolonize curricula. This is very much related to the idea of the importance of identity, the importance of teaching history from the right side, to really have an intercultural approach to these issues. And this is very much at the core of the ambition we have also in this process of transforming education, of building a new sense of narrative for all regions of the world, as they should have. So this vision is fully embodied in Agenda 2063 and the Charter for African Cultural Renaissance. In that spirit, let me now outline briefly these two flagships more in detail. And you'll see that we will complement and reach then with your explanations inside in the second part of the meeting. Let's start with Campus Africa. And let me recall some data, some numbers that I'm sure you have in mind. Despite the very rapid increases in enrollment in tertiary education across the continent, enrollment in sub-Saharan region stands at around 9% against 74% of the north of the world. The challenge in this decade ahead will be then both to democratize access and to democratize knowledge and research. This is, by the way, a strong message which comes from the World Higher Education Conference we just had in Barcelona 1 month ago. And among the 6 transitions that have been put as the next transition to address effectively with concrete initiatives democratization of higher education and having higher education as a strong component of the right to education and the right to learn is one pillar of this strategy. It's simply a matter of quality for sure, but most importantly, it's a matter of equity, of boosting research and innovation capacity that are geared to societal challenges and priorities. I don't see any real development and future of development of Africa without strong infrastructures for knowledge and research. Strengthening and connecting then Africa's tertiary education systems and institutions is key to widening opportunities and advancing socio-economic development. So it's a question of human rights and it's a question of economic and societal development. Let me highlight the action framework we have in mind and we want to propose to your attention and discussion today. Campus Africa focuses on improving Africa's tertiary education system capacities by supporting policies and initiatives that you see on this slide. Yes, thank you. And you'll see that the approach we have in mind is a comprehensive one. It's about creating a network of tertiary education institutions, hubs, what we call intensive research hubs, to share knowledge, data, information, tools, and materials, and support, this is a critical point, let me highlight, the development of PhD programs. This is not a simply question for Africa. You know, the main important asset of universities is about PhD programs, because PhD programs are the real center of production of new research and knowledge. And many African universities today don't actually have the capacity to develop PhD schools and PhD programs. Academic mobility comes in here, which is another important component. It's key to promoting collaboration, unlocking innovation, and Campus Africa aims also to improve recognition of foreign degrees and inter-university cooperation underpinned by the founding principles and obligations of the Addis Recognition Convention for Higher Education, as well as the Global Convention. So now we have the two legal frameworks, both the global and the regional one, but now it's a question of implementing the potential and unlock the potential of those two. As we heard already through many testimonies at this pre-summit, refugees face a huge obstacle still in accessing tertiary education. UNESCO will use Campus Africa to broaden the implementation of the Unesco qualification passport for refugees and vulnerable migrants. We can talk about schools, education system, vocational also keep having either developing doctrine mode, developed precondition, as Chipax already mentioned. Present one is now in its design, last mile of this, and UNESCO is inviting here our goodwill ambassadors. It's very much a boost. About you have to start phase with the following: quotations, act, and for national practices already, and allowing availability for innovation composed of tertiary and technical education. Exchange of experiences, technical assistance, knowledge, and information that is a big thing, but when in months. Now, general history of it's very well embedded as already course to fundamental and African point of the importance of languages. Exchangers for the younger generation. This is a major success for me, and so that's why it's so important to discuss in this meeting. And thanks to my colleague Eduard, when we were discussing how we tune the presence of means or more to be tables are fundamental for education and throughout citizenship, appreciation of cultural diversity, and culture's contribution to sustainable development. We are fully committed at UNESCO, as you know, to supporting all of you, member states, in promoting and making the education system concrete, which has curriculum, pedagogy, teacher education, and professional development. Along these four lines, there is a real vast repertoire of multimedia pedagogical materials for use in formal and not formal educational settings, including the collection of 8 current volumes of the general history of Africa, which are being updated, supplemented by an additional 3 volumes recently, as you know. And these are really, a robust ground to effectively mainstream the GHA in a systemic and sustainable way. So quickly to describe the 3 interconnected components in terms of the implementation. First, transformation of education through 3 pillars of African identity: history, languages, and common heritage. It entails the effective integration of GHA in the curriculum and specifically in the syllabus supported by educational materials and teacher training. Second point, strengthening knowledge production on the history of Africa to facilitate the publication of new volumes and cover issues related to the global African diasporas and challenges they face. Our colleagues already mentioned of social science sector will, with us today, have been and still are actively leading on this critical part of the research. And the last but not least, lifelong learning and outreach, which implies supporting adaptation of curriculum of the general history of Africa and African languages and cultures in non-formal education and educational activities. And this is about reaching out to the broader audience. So how do we go ahead? How do we take it forward? How do we transform Africa through this, or contribute to transform African education system through this flagship? We see like this, the general history of Africa is to be comprehensively integrated into the curriculum of all Africa primary and secondary schools as a cross-cutting issue with a specific focus on teachers and learners and all related activities necessary to be implemented effectively. And here it's very much important to note that curriculum investment means investment in, as for all other transformational processes, in teachers to be well equipped and prepared. It's not simply new content, but it's about being able to transmit in a new way this new narrative and knowledge. And this mainstreaming also entails promoting the integration of multilingual teaching and learning into national language policies. We know the complexity. We don't undermine the investment required to do that, but we do think that this is an essential part of the job. And here it's another dimension where I see the use of platform, digital platform can really help to build a new horizon. Then, of course, a series of guidance tools and teaching materials and resources will be produced linking to the flagship, to a vision of education that can support democratic citizenship and the fight against the prejudice and discrimination. This includes, for example, building on our work to integrate the Southern African liberation history into curricula of the sub-region, further to a ministerial decision last year, just to give a concrete example. And we are very pleased to be accompanying this important endeavor. Then availability of interactive, agile digital platforms, also capitalizing on existing ones. We just discussed yesterday with the Minister of Egypt, who was in this room, who's doing an incredibly work in his country. There are good examples of another, examples, but I think it's about building on existing tools we have and see how they can be scaled up and used eventually to really unlock the potential of technology to the service of this important flagship. And of course, this requires, just to go to the last point of my colleague Edouard, significant new investment. It's not about simply designing a very detailed action plan, but it's about addressing effectively digital divide. Not by chance, action track number 5, which has been very effectively discussed yesterday in the plenary session, is one of the pillars of Transforming Education Summit. Last point, you know, all in all, this flagship to be effectively implemented requires a multi-stakeholder approach. It's not simply a question of education. I think education is the core of this ambitious initiative, but it's very much about promoting Africa's culture heritage within and through education, connected with many other sectors, including culture, of course, first ministers of culture, and as it concerns has here at UNESCO, a real intersectoral approach as we are taking. So, in ending, let me stress the critical role that all of you in this room can play, either ministers of education first, of course, but all the other critical stakeholders and partners we have here, including UN sister agencies, including the private sector, including goodwill ambassadors. I think it's a real special time where we can do something that is not be possible in the last decades, and it's about our collective ambition and responsibility of translating this vision and this ambition in a concrete action. I thank you very much, and we count on you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Many thanks, Ms. Giannini. I noted you talked of decolonizing the curricula, particularly by reviewing history curricular through the general history of Africa, and also through the promotion of local languages as a language for learning. Those are two major thrusts that will be a great lever to transform education in Africa. I'd like to pay a tribute to those two major initiatives and major thrusts underscored by our ADG. It's at the heart of our education program through what we call endogenous curricular, to value the local cultures through the curricular, and starting by promoting the learning by children in the local languages, in the languages they speak at home. Many thanks, Madam Giannini. Last year, the PAX DG, along with the Africa Group, organized a meeting with the education sector. And what came out of this meeting was a strong recommendation by the Africa Group, namely promoting the teaching of the general history of Africa and promoting this general history of Africa in the education curricula. And a number of African countries made tangible steps along those lines. In that context, it's my pleasure to invite Ms. Evangeline Yoka from Kenya. She represents the Minister of Education in Kenya. Please share the experience of Kenya on that front. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I am delighted to represent my minister, the Kenya Minister for Education, Professor George Magoha. Ladies and gentlemen, as you have already heard, the UNESCO General History of Africa project was launched in 1964 as a response to the need for Africa to tell her story from an Afrocentric perspective. Although the General History of Africa project was African-driven, following a request to UNESCO by newly independent African states way back in 1964, a majority of African countries are yet to integrate this history into their curricula. And it is for this reason that the African Union Ministers of Education made a decision in October 2017 that the General History of Africa pedagogical materials be adapted for schools across Africa. I think it is in the same spirit that the General History of Africa has become a flagship project in the new operational strategy for Priority Africa, as we all know, and as already very well articulated by Stephanie and also Matoko. It is noteworthy that UNESCO has developed these pedagogical materials for us, for member states, to integrate the General History of Africa into schools' curriculum across Africa. And this is greatly appreciated. Kenya has integrated the General History of Africa into curricula up to the diploma teacher colleges. And integration into higher levels, that is tertiary education, is currently underway. And the journey to start the process coincided with the implementation of the competence-based curriculum, which seeks to develop an engaged, empowered, and ethical citizen. Indeed, the integration of GHA into curriculum will go a long way into helping our learners understand and appreciate their identity, which is a key milestone towards developing a sense of belonging and empowerment. And now the new term that we have learned, decolonizing, indeed, curriculum or even education. This is it. This is what the General History of Africa will do. The integration of General History of Africa into a Kenya curriculum has been ongoing about 3 years. And this has been through close collaboration between UNESCO, of course, the Ministry of Education being at the center, the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, and the Kenya National Commission for UNESCO. And this is the institution where I work in. Ladies and gentlemen, the process of integration commenced in 2018 with the sensitization of curriculum developers drawn from various subject matter on the General History of Africa and the legacies of slavery programs. And this resulted in consensus building on the importance of integrating the pedagogical GHA content into the curriculum. The Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, with the support of UNESCO and the Commission for UNESCO, took leadership in setting up the curriculum development panels for history and social studies for grades 4 to 12 and teacher training institutes. And the following achievements have been made so far. One, identification of the 9 core strands from the GHA pedagogical matrices, which is very critical for integration. The scooping and sequencing of the 9 core strands. The development of GHA mainstreaming matrices for upper primary school, that is grades 4, 5, and 6. This was done in 2018. And in 2020, junior secondary education matrices were developed to integrate curriculum into grades, to integrate GHA into grade 7, 8, and 9 curriculum, and also senior secondary school curriculum was done in 2020 in grades 10, 11, and 12, and also the diploma secondary teacher education curriculum also was done in 2022. So GHA then has been integrated from the upper primary to the teacher education level. The mainstreaming of GHA matrices are intended as a source. The GHA mainstreaming matrices are intended as a resource for curriculum developers to guide in the integration of GHA in the formal, the non-formal, and informal dimensions of learning, and it aims at facilitating curriculum developers to be intentional in identifying GHA concepts that can be integrated in the various subjects as they design curricula. The matrices also provide the knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes to be taught explicitly during formal learning. Most of the content from GHA strands have been mainstreamed in the grades from the grades 4 to 9 in the social studies curriculum design. About 10% of the GHA content is mainstreamed into other subjects like agriculture, home science, health education, performing arts, visual arts, physical education, and Kiswahili. Ladies and gentlemen, what did it take for Kenya to achieve this? One is identifying the specific government and non-government partners under whose purview GHA mainstreaming falls, and that is, in our case, was the Ministry of Education and Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, and also identifying the key partner, which was UNESCO. Secondly, capacity building and sensitizing stakeholders and government partners on GHA to ensure there is a common understanding of GHA and the importance of integration. We also did resource mobilization, both human and financial, to develop matrices, and then identifying the correct opportunity. And Kenya was in the process of reforming its curriculum. So being able to indeed identify the most opportune opportunity was critical. As I conclude, there is need to equip our teachers to adequately deliver GHA at the classroom level. And GHA provides the knowledge, concepts, theories, and skills required to enhance the teaching of history and reignite the spirit of patriotism, unity, and Pan-African solidarity among learners. Kenya is willing to share our experience this far with any country. We are ready, and so the Minister for Education did emphasize that Kenya is open and we are ready to share our experiences. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la...
Many thanks, Madam. Given the challenges underscored by Ms. Giannini for Campus Africa, we had invited the Association of African Universities, but at the last minute, Mr. Olusula could not make it, unfortunately. Now we will listen to the voices of young people. The representative lady of youth will share with us now the ideas that young people have to take part in transforming education. So I hand over to the youth representative.
Distinguished guests, allow me to stand on existing protocols, and I bring you warm greetings from the African Union Commission. My name is Janice Kumalo, and I lead the youth engagement work in the Women, Youth, and Gender Directorate in the AUC. And I am delivering these remarks on behalf of Ms. Chido Mpemba, who is the AUC Youth Envoy. The journey towards transformative education has to begin yesterday. Now, this is a statement that one of the speakers brilliantly mentioned on the opening ceremony, and it has been a recurring theme in the past 3 days. It has been an eye-opener and has evoked a sense of pride to see my fellow young people champion the very thing that allows us all to occupy these specific spaces and navigate the world so confidently. Ladies and gentlemen, the magnitude of the learning crisis across the world means business as usual simply will not work. As the world changes, it means our skill set must change. Along with it, so more of an adaptive and immediate response is needed. Young people in Africa today do not always have the technical and vocational skills relevant for the 21st century job market, and they are therefore unable to meaningfully contribute to the achievement of the AU's Agenda 2063, a development framework that seeks to realize a prosperous and integrated Africa. To do this, we must reimagine, we must transform and evolve. Looking around the room, it is clear how powerful education is. It connects, it communicates, it reimagines our societies. We pride ourselves on being youthful a continent, and our challenge, therefore, is to translate the demographic bulge and burden in countries into the demographic dividend that can be harnessed. Education is essential for consolidating Africa's history, language, as well as cultural heritage from generation to generation for the attainment of Africa's transformation embodied in Agenda 2063. The relevance of the General History of Africa initiative by Unesco and its integration into the education systems on the continent cannot be overemphasized. The general history of Africa may speak to the past, but it will shape the Pan-African future. The ideals of Pan-Africanism, as well as the African Renaissance, need to be embedded in the education systems in Africa in order to reimagine, to transform, and to evolve. A topic that is frequently highlighted on the AUC Youth Corner podcast series Conversations that discuss culture, heritage, as well as languages. It is also important to highlight the importance of higher education, specifically talking about Campus Africa, which I feel it was aptly introduced by Ms. Stefania. It reinforces higher education in Africa for sustained improvement of the tertiary education system. In this, there's a need for sustainable financing of public higher education provision, which is critical for safeguarding the equitable access to and quality enhancement of higher education systems, and to adequately reflect the vital role the sector plays in long-term national development strategies. We have some way to journey. If we are to ensure the safe, educated demographic dividend, we need to reimagine, transform, evolve. The AU Envoy's office has launched a Continental Youth Survey, and some of the key things that keep coming out of this survey point to young people's demand for transformational educational systems. An educational system that is inclusive of all voices across the world, primarily young African voices. A system that embraces representation across all demographics and ensures no one is left behind. An education system that is robust to embrace digitalization in the midst of crisis, as well as to ensure children, young people, and also have access to quality education. Now, we have noted these key points, and with the support of the UNICEF Office to the African Union, we are currently collating these young voices for policy action. Ladies and gentlemen, in order to realize a transformative educational system, it will require collective efforts and strong partnerships. In recognizing this, the AUC, through the Education Division, the Youth Division, and the Office of the Youth Envoy, and other development partners have been implementing several initiatives, such as the DOTS framework, the Digital Learning Strategy, the African Union Toolbox, the Mentorship Program, which also is aimed at giving young people spaces to accelerate education processes across the African continent. Now, this approach must lead our young Africans to embrace a new, authentic African narrative that will develop a sense of pride in the African heritage, the language, and it will give them the self-esteem and confidence that they need. I invite you to join the African Union, as well as with its partners, in revolutionizing learning and skills development for young people through digital learning, internet connectivity, access to affordable devices, and data. I cannot stress this, and data. In closing, allow me to appreciate UNESCO for extending this invitation, and I trust you will continue to find ways to partner with the AUC Commission. The remembering thing here is to reimagine, transform, and evolve. Now, in closing, allow me to just finally give you a quote from Joe Besford, which I think is very apt for the conversation today. To innovate in the education system, one must be thinking of innovation through collaboration and be prepared to listen, because innovations take time, and you have to be willing to take the journey with the community that serves you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We have about 10 minutes to go. Thank you for, we heard the call for involvement of the youth, and this is well noted, more involvement. We have about 10 minutes to go. I will give the floor to a few people, and please do it in 1 minute or 1 minute, 30 seconds. I already have people who have requested, and I'm asking Mr. Zhao, the Secretary General of ITU, to take the floor, please, if he is around. Yes.
Thank you very much, my dear friend. It's my pleasure to join you here at this very important meeting. As Secretary General of ITU, we consider education absolutely important for the new society, information society. Therefore, ITU has worked very closely with UNESCO to launch a lot of common projects. And myself, for each time when I go to our member state to visit, I always add one university on my agenda. And I've also tried to find time to visit middle schools, primary schools in the countryside. And with my limited knowledge, I think that our Africa universities, they have good knowledge about the latest technologies discussed at ITU. And even those universities of the member states who are not very active in ITU, but their students, their teachers know this. While the middle school, primary school, I see a lot of challenges. And I found that in some mountain areas, although their capitals already enjoyed 5G, but in the mountain areas, primary school, secondary school, there's no internet connection. There's no coverage of even 4G or 3G. So that pandemic, we know that many cities already have broadband connection at home, while in our remote areas of developing countries, they cannot take benefit of this. Therefore, that the country try to provide teaching materials, even through television channels. So that help, but it's not interactive. We learned that this morning you have asked for interactive digital platform. And here we do have international available platform interactive, like Zooms, like Teams or the others. All these ITU also worked very hard with our industry to provide technologies. So I think that this is quite important, and I'm very pleased, our ADG recognized me here to ask you to ask me to say a few words. And ITU is international, companies of telecommunications as our sector members, we have more than 900 big or small companies. And we also have a new category of our membership is the universities. Since 2011, we have already got more than 180 universities from developing countries as our members, because we consider the university researchers has a very big research capacity, and if they come to join us, they can bring their researchers and students to come to our main stream of technology standard making process. So I don't think I should abuse too much of your time. Let me just stop here that I'm very pleased to join you here, and I see great potential in our Africa continent, and I see a lot of efforts already made by our education ministry and by our government to support the young people to get a much better education system. I would like to just express our desire to stay with you, to go together with you, to make ICT be beneficial to our education system, to make that information society be really enjoyed by everybody. So let me just thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll give the floor to a few ministers. There's one, the Minister of Egypt, and then I have 3 ambassadors, and we will try to do 1 minute per person. So I have the Minister of Egypt. If I have another minister, I will take before I give the floor to the 3 ambassadors. Do I have minister from Ethiopia? And then, so I have 2 ministers, Egypt and Ethiopia. Okay. Okay. Honorable Minister from c'est quel pays? Ah, ok. Ok, donc on a 3 ministres.
Oh, we have 3 ministers and then ambassadors. Sorry, we're just very short of time. Apologies. You have the floor, sir. Minister from Egypt.
As you know, Egypt is a proud African nation and also sits in the heart of the Arab world. And I think we have a lot of things that fit directly into Campus Africa, and we're very excited about the History of Africa project as well. So actually, we discussed a lot of details, but there are things we can share and do as of tomorrow, things that are very concrete. Digital platforms to share, learning management systems for higher education, exam platforms, programs on university rankings, on faculty training, on publishing, enhancing publishing in African universities, the quality of the degrees and the matching of degrees across the continent. All of that are existing programs. We have a digital platform in Egypt that we can open up to African countries. It exists in 3 languages. It has all this content, and it can really be very effective within the Campus Africa program. In technical education, we have also just put together a quality control and accreditation agency. We call it ITCAN, or Perfection in English. And that could accredit technical institutions across the continent. It's really going to raise the quality of technical education. We have also competency-based curricula for over 200 disciplines and jobs that we can happily share. So there is a lot of work there. Now, for the history of Africa, I'm familiar with that for many years, that UNESCO has done a lot of work. There is a lot of hidden treasures here. So those could be made available to African countries, at least digitally and on TV channels very quickly, and make its way to curricula and across the continent. So we will be more than happy to do that. And we are building actually our own new education system, and our biggest challenge is not the history of Africa, but the history of Egypt for grades 7 to 12. It is not easy. and to do it properly and connect with the African history, I think we can build on what UNESCO has very concretely. So I'll stop there and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I give the floor to His Excellency, the Minister from Ethiopia.
Thank you very much. I would like to congratulate UNESCO for taking this new vision for African history and the African higher education issue, which is the most important. As earlier said, unless we see education in a holistic manner, in an interconnected way, improving the general education would take us nowhere, unless otherwise really just we made a difference on the higher education. So we are very much pleased. We have been following the initiative and we are grateful. We are reviewing the document and we'll be just really working to align with the national curricula. Particularly at the general education level, we had an opportunity because Ethiopia is reviewing its national curriculum and we are introducing a new curriculum that would give us another opportunity to look at our contents in terms of the African history and align with. So that's really great to look at African history by the Africans themselves and re-narrate its history to the world, what it was and what it can be in the future. That's really very important. Having said this, the technical assistance, maybe just if you reflect on, by UNESCO, we believe that is very essential, but greatly depends on the capacity and the resource available to national offices. Without the capacity and the resources, mere presence of the UNESCO office in the respective country wouldn't make much difference. That's what we would like to really just to make a note at this juncture. And finally, my point is transforming Africa requires another prior transformation. And that has been said much yesterday. That is, we need to transform our promises into actions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Son Excellence, Monsieur le Ministre.
Minister of Education from Haiti, you have the floor. Good morning. I would like to thank UNESCO for this excellent initiative. It was high time we worked to transform our education system. Haiti is in favor of this initiative, warmly welcomes this new authentic African narrative on Africa. Haiti truly desires that the African peoples living outside of Africa, our African diaspora, be reported on in the upcoming volumes of the General History of Africa. We dearly hope that the history of the diaspora will be written into this General History of Africa and history of Haiti being part of it. Haiti is keenly interested in sharing its recent experience with the use of multilingual education. We have a great deal of experience with this and we would like to share this knowledge with others. You cannot transform education without leveraging our youth, our demographic wealth to transform education. Thank you very kindly for your attention.
Merci, Excellence.
Thank you, Excellency. The last speaker will be Her Excellency, the Minister of Education for Gabon. And then we have 3 ambassadors. You have the floor. Madam, thank you very kindly and thank you for allowing Gabon to participate. I truly congratulate UNESCO. You have done excellent work on this theme of transforming Africa through education and through the leveraging of its rich history. This is absolutely critical, and Gabon is in full support of these two programs that have been described. The holistic approach is, in our view, essential. Education must be inclusive. Our history is chock-a-block with extraordinarily varied treasures, and it is little known, not only by ourselves but by our children. It is a duty to restore this history, to ensure that it is of benefit to the young generations who will be, of course, the future of our world, but also the true treasure of our societies. Gabon has a rich history when it comes to the African descendants. Yanda, the history of Yanda. Nobody has heard of him, but he was the first liberator from Gabon. He was the first to fight for liberation from slavery in Mexico. This is critical information, and it is only by sharing such information, by pooling our knowledge, by creating a best practices community that we will be able to beneficiate the educational system in Africa and harness the power of our history. The COVID crisis served to remind us that absent ITCs, we cannot teach our children. So we must absolutely include ITC to our education systems to, again, harness the power of our African history. Thank you, Excellencies. Gabon just wanted to express its tremendous support for UNESCO's work. It's enthusiastic support. Thank you very kindly. Thank you, Excellency. We're going to hear the three ambassadors who have requested it. The floor, Chile.
Time is very short, 3 sentences. Number 1, science, technology is the driving force for Priority Africa. Crucial. And then, in order to develop science, you need science education. If you develop science education, you need STEM in primary, secondary schools, you need STI in universities, you need TVET. For all this, we need infrastructure. Science education cannot happen without a proper lab, without teachers, without textbooks. Crucial. This is my first sentence. Number 2, to transform education in Africa, UNESCO per se needs to be transformed. I echo what our Ethiopia minister said. Our field network, our capacity of UNESCO field offices need to be strengthened. Even our moderator, your capacity of RBE needs to be strengthened. How many experts have you got for science education in your curriculum development department? Please tell me if you have any expert for science education for STEM in RBE. It is called International Bureau of Education. If we cannot strengthen our own capacity, how we can expect to promote transformation of education in Africa? My final sentence is what China will do. 3 things. To continue our CFID program, China Trust in Fund for education in Africa. We've done it for 10 years. We will continue. With RCT, for TVET, and for teacher training. Number 2, hand in hand of Chinese universities and African universities. Now we established 20 Chinese universities with 20 African universities. We will expand to 55 Chinese universities to 55 African universities. Each university in Africa, national university, will have a partner in China. This is called hand in the hand, the compass. And then number 3, we will translate the general history of Africa into the Chinese language. General history of Africa is not only for African students. It is for the rest of the world. We will have to educate our young Chinese to understand Africa. That's what we will do. We need concrete actions. Thank you very much indeed.
Many thanks, Your Merci beaucoup, Excellence.
Thank you, Excellency. Sudan has the floor.
Moderator, my intervention consists of 2 points. Point 1 is a question to Mr. Matoko, or maybe much more adequately to Mrs. Giannini, and it concerns the outcome of the series of meetings held so far over the past few years on the issue of the pedagogical use of the general history of Africa, including the meeting held in Khartoum in 2015 and the subsequent meetings. And the meeting of Khartoum witnessed the issuance of the Khartoum Declaration on the subject matter. And point 2, as we are celebrating here and honoring the history of Africa, I would like to avail myself of this opportunity to urge all of you to go and visit the exhibition Taharka, Pharaoh of the Two Lands, which is currently conducted and held in the Louvre Museum in Paris. Taharka is, of course, one of the greatest Kushite or Nubian kings of the 25th Egyptian dynasty, and here I'm speaking under the control of His Excellency, the Minister of Education of Sisterly Egypt. And that dynasty, which reigned sometime between the 8th and 7th century BC. So that is indeed a glorious page of the African history, which deserves to be seen and to be honored. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. The last person to take the floor is the ambassador from Japan. Your Excellency, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll try to be short. Well, just like Ambassador of China, Ambassador Yanjin, I'll try to make only a few points. Now, Africa is a global priority, and we continue to support Africa in many different ways, just like China. And also, we have actually supported a number of UNESCO projects in Africa. But in the area of education, I think our efforts were more concentrated on addressing immediate needs rather than long-term investment. I'm very frank on this one. And then we have, for example, supported the ICBA project, which combines the peace education and vocational training. And also we are supporting a project, the Girls Back to School. Those are somewhat related to terrorism issues in Africa. So we have been trying to address more immediate needs in the past and in the near future. Now, we fully understand the importance of long-term investment. I have a question in that regard, because people are talking about the sustainable financing for tertiary education. In that case, we need to involve the private sector. Now, for example, Japan has been promoting education for sustainable development. One of the core elements there is green economy. We have huge green industries nowadays. So to try to get some funds from those private entities into education, into higher education, must be a very big priority. We are ready to support this kind of endeavors, but in any case, what is important is what is the role of UNESCO in trying to promote the private company involvement in higher education. That, for the sake of sustainable financing, this, I think, is a very important element. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Before we conclude, we are now going to, because the representative of the youth said that we should give the voice to the youth. We have two young people who will take 1 minute each of them to share something. We have one young man, Mr. Chief Mumen, who is a poet from Ghana. And we also have Miss Aimee Alfonso, who is an Afro-Cuban singer and songwriter, who will share a few things with us very quickly. I invite the two young people.
Thank you very much.
Take the floor. Yeah.
Thank you very much. As an artist from Africa, I'm proud to say that many young African artists and content creators, through their own, are producing content that is redefining the image of Africa away from the stereotypes that we are used to. So we have shown the way, and it is time for our African governments to catch up, not only with resources, but by helping to define an overarching vision that influences the way young Africans think to influence the kind of content that we create. For example, why does Africa spend billions of dollars to import skin lightening creams? It's because we do not appreciate our history and our heritage, and we are influenced by colonialism and imperialism. And so our educational systems must help to liberate our thinking, to decolonize our thinking, and to instill pride in us. In so doing, if we think of these things in these areas, not only will we be retaining billions of dollars that we spend on consumption patterns that are not of substance, but because of the way we think, we are going to help to grow our local economies. And when it comes to connecting campuses across Africa, it not only should be with academia and lecturers, it should also be with the young people. Young Africans across Africa must be engaging in exchange programs. East Africa, North Africa, Southern Africa. We usually have a lot of exchange programs with European countries, but not with ourselves. If we do not unite our minds and our hearts at the very foundation of education, then all our effort at collaborating to liberate and enforce progress on our continent will not be achieved. So let us unite the minds and the hearts of young Africans with education and free us with our thinking as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 1 minute for Miss Alfonso. Elle est là. Ah oui, allez-y, allez-y.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Aimee Alfonso. I'm a musician from Cuba. I grew up in an artistic environment, and the music I made today has been inherited from my ancestors. My family have studied the Yoruba influence in Cuba since in the 70s, a whole culture of rhythm, melodies, and dances that I didn't learn in books. So they are transmitted oral by fathers and mothers and sons and daughters. So I have the opportunity to learn in my educational training. I would love to learn in my educational training the history of my ancestors, not only when they arrived to America, but their kingdoms, their customs, their community. Perhaps it will feel more complete today. Sometimes we see the history of others as our own because we have lost part of our information. And for this reason, we tend to complete ourselves with cultural patterns that have nothing to do with us, and we have costumes that are not ours. Many of us lose part of our own identity, but not seeing ourselves reflect with certain elements of African history we know. I have met many artists who come from Africa and from African diaspora in Caribbean and Latin America who have opened my eyes to understand an important part of who I am. Through music, they have told history, they have transmitted a message of equity, brotherhood, and social justice. Artists are storytellers by nature. I am an Afro-Cuban woman with influence from all over the world, and I would like for the future and for my children that they could understand all aspects of their identity through a correct African history. So thank you for giving me the opportunity of learn from you and dream a better future for them.
Merci. Merci beaucoup. Now the last word, concluding word, I will start by giving the floor to Madame Giannini, who has a big constraint she has to leave. Yes.
Thank you very much. Just quickly to address a couple of questions I heard from the floor, and thanks all excellencies for your comments and support. From Sudan, I don't see the ambassador anymore. Yeah, he left. So I was not here in 2015, but we are building for the process of, for elaboration of the pedagogical new tools on the work of Cartoon, and my colleague Eduard was there, and so it's not starting from scratch, of course. Japan, Excellency, private sector, as you know, We now can count on permanent platform, which is the Global Education Coalition, with more than 200 partners. Half of them, more or less, are the private sector. Many of them are here around in this pre-summit, and that's a good channel to communicate, disseminate this, the knowledge of this initiative, and hopefully to keep them on board. Immediate needs, this is my very personal view. Sincerely, I think that having in Africa 9% of access to higher education versus 75–80% in the north of the world is a very immediate need as well. But this is my vision. Thank you.
I will now give the floor to Mr. Ambadi Mashelini, who is the head of Science and Technology Commission Division in the African Union Commission, for his conclusive words. You have the floor, Your Excellency.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Moderator. Your Excellencies, our ministers, ambassadors, heads of delegation, and colleagues. My brother here, Mr. Matoko. My name is Amban Mashelen. It's part of the general history of Africa. So we are very glad to be here today. As I am in the closing session, I think mine is also to thank you for being here today. I think it's a great illustration and commitment that we are undertaking to pledge our allegiance to this global responsibility to transform our education. We thank you very much for the reactions you have provided, the commitments that you have made to support the process, and we are glad that we will move forward on the continent of Africa to ensure that we realize the goals that we set for ourselves through the Agenda 2063, which the Youth Envoy and majority of you have ably reacted to. I would also want to thank the UNESCO colleagues. We have excellent collaboration with UNESCO at the level of the Department of Education, Science, Technology, and Innovation. Priority Africa is an important undertaking that UNESCO has invested to us in Africa to mobilize different partners as well as member states to be part of this transformation process. It will tremendously contribute to the implementation of our set goals within Agenda 2063, the Charter for Cultural Renaissance, and moving forward. We are very happy that the two projects that have been highlighted here actually shines two spotlights to very important issues. Higher education. Higher education in Africa requires revitalization for it to deliver. And the minister from Ethiopia here has ably alluded to that we need to have and develop caliber, human resources of high caliber. We need to develop people with high capacities to carry out research, to respond to our development needs. We need Africa to shine. But at the same time, there's a need to connect higher education institutions and technologies, as alluded to by ITU and Japan, becomes very important, as well as infrastructures associated with that. So we are very glad that you are all becoming part and parcel of this process, and we in Africa, we stand to be the great beneficiaries because we have all the resources and the potential to transform our education. And I thank you very much for having been here and what you have said and pledged to this process. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I will now give the conclusive word to Mr. Edouard Mato.
Thank you, Ido. Very briefly, first of all, thank you, my brother. African Union has been a key partner of UNESCO in the implementation of the first strategy, and this one also count on your support, political support, support of the head of states in the implementation of this new strategy, especially for the History Journal of Africa. I would like to thank all of you for your participation. I want to thank the ministers and ambassadors that have offered support to this program. I would like to thank Ambassador of China. Starting for tomorrow, we'll start translating the Journal History of Africa into Chinese, I hope. I would like also to thank the Minister of Egypt, who has offered some facilities and some collaborative platform to support our projects. Je voudrais remercier aussi le ministre de la Haïti.
I'd like also thank the Minister of Haiti for her participation. We did say that diaspora is a key element of African identity and African development. We're very proud to have Haiti among the observers group at UNESCO.
Stefania, DG Education, and her team behind here. My own team, of course, sitting around the room for organizing this meeting. And thank you also, Evangelina, for coming from Kenya to share your experience, and all our youngsters around here. You are the future of Africa, and I hope that will be actively involved in the implementation of this new strategy, as you hope. Just last mention, Ambassador of Japan. I'm on the private sector. There will be, I think BSP is planning a high-level dialogue later this year or beginning next year on the financing dialogue with all UNESCO's partners, and private sector will be part of this dialogue. We'll have also a specific session for Priority Africa and all flagship programs. So we do hope that, of course, the private sector will be interested in supporting our programs. Thank you again. Merci à tous et bonne continuation. Merci.
Many thanks again.